Wrong? A place that looked ordinary at first glance, but the air itself whispered that you didn't belong there. Tonight, let me take you into the story of a traveler who wandered into a village that should never have existed, a place that appeared from nowhere and swallowed those who dared to stay. Our story begins with Daniel Clark, a history researcher from London. He wasn't a thrill seeker, not a ghost hunter, just a man obsessed with uncovering forgotten places lost to time. He had heard whispers of a settlement deep in the countryside of Eastern Europe, a village that wasn't on any map. Locals called it the Hollow Hamlet. They said it was cursed, a place that flickered in and out of existence, appearing only to the unlucky. Daniel laughed it off. To him, it was nothing more than folklore, a story for drunk villagers by a fire. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. He rented a car, packed his notes, and set out alone into the endless forests where the hamlet was said to appear. The road was long, cracked and overgrown, as if nature itself had tried to erase it. By the time the sun began to sink behind the trees, Daniel's GPS had stopped working. No signal, no towns, no people, only the winding path cutting through silent woods. Just when he began to think the stories were a waste of his time, he saw smoke, a thin, curling line rising from between the trees. And then he saw it, the village. It was small, a cluster of stone cottages with thatched roofs, chimneys puffing faintly into the dusk, chickens clucked in the distance, a lantern glowed faintly by a wooden well. For a moment, Daniel felt relief. Civilization, at last. But something was off. The air was too still, too quiet. Not a single voice, not a single face, just the village, waiting. Daniel parked his car at the edge of the settlement and stepped out. His footsteps crunched on the dirt road, echoing louder than they should have. The cottages looked frozen in time, untouched by modern hands. He tried knocking on one of the doors. No answer. He tried another. Again, nothing. The houses were warm, lived in, but abandoned. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. Villages don't just stand empty like this. Where was everyone? And then Daniel noticed something stranger still. There were no paths leading away from the village, no roads, no trails. The dirt track he had driven on was gone. His car now sat surrounded by trees, as if the forest had swallowed the road behind him. He was trapped. But the real horror had only just begun. What would you do if you found yourself in a place that shouldn't exist? Would you explore, or would you run before it's too late? Because in the next part, Daniel begins to discover the terrifying truth about the Vanishing Village and why no one who enters ever leaves. Daniel stood at the edge of the village, his breath clouding in the cooling air. He told himself it was just his imagination. Roads don't disappear. Villages don't just appear out of nowhere. Maybe fatigue was playing tricks on him, but deep down, he knew something was terribly wrong. He walked further into the village, his shoes crunching on gravel paths that seemed older than time itself. The air smelled faintly of burning wood, though no flames were in sight. When he peered through the windows of the cottages, he saw plates of food set on tables, half-eaten, mugs filled with dark, stagnant water. It looked as if the villagers had simply stood up in the middle of their meal and walked away, never to return. A sudden creak made him spin around. A door to one of the cottages was slowly opening, though no hand touched it. The hinges groaned like something ancient and heavy. Daniel called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But his voice was swallowed by silence. He stepped toward the open doorway and found himself looking into a dimly lit kitchen. On the floor lay a child's toy, a wooden horse with one wheel missing. He bent to pick it up and nearly dropped it when he noticed the wood was still warm, as though it had been held only moments ago. That's when he heard it. Footsteps, not behind him, not in front of him, but everywhere at once. The hollow clap of bare feet on stone echoed through the narrow lanes. Daniel froze. "Hello?" he whispered again. No reply, just the footsteps circling him. He bolted back to his car, but when he reached it, the headlights flickered on by themselves, then off again. He yanked the driver's door, but it wouldn't budge. The locks had jammed. That's when he noticed something carved into the side of his car. Words scratched deep into the metal. They read, "Welcome back." His hands trembled as he backed away, his mind racing. Back. He had never been here before. Had he? The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the empty cottages. The once quaint village now looked like a stage set, pretty on the surface but hollow inside. That's when he saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the path. It was tall, cloaked in black, its face hidden in the fading light. Daniel squinted, trying to see more clearly, but the figure vanished in an instant, like smoke dissolving into thin air. Panic clawed at his chest. He needed answers. He needed to know what this place was. He stumbled toward the well in the center of the square, the lantern still flickering weakly beside it. Scratched into the wooden frame of the well were dozens of names, dozens of English names, all etched deep into the wood as if by desperate hands. And at the very bottom, he found his own name, Daniel Clark. The lantern hissed, sputtered, and went out. Do you believe places can remember you, even if you've never been there? Or is Daniel trapped in something much older and darker than simple memory? Because in the next part, Daniel will learn that the Vanishing Village isn't abandoned at all. Something is still there, waiting. The night came down fast, as if the sun had been ripped out of the sky. One moment the village was cloaked in twilight. The next, it was swallowed in complete darkness. Daniel fumbled for his phone, desperate for light, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead, though the battery had been full. The silence was unbearable. Not the kind of silence you find in the countryside, filled with crickets and owls, but a suffocating, unnatural stillness. Then, without warning, the well in the center of the village groaned. It wasn't just the wood creaking. It sounded alive, as if something deep below was moving. Daniel backed away, his pulse hammering, and that's when the voices began. Children laughing, women whispering, men murmuring prayers. The sounds came from every cottage at once, though the windows remained empty and dark. He spun in circles, trying to find the source, but it was everywhere, around him, inside the very air he breathed. Driven by fear and curiosity, Daniel forced himself into one of the cottages. Inside, the smell hit him first, rot mixed with something metallic, like rust or blood. The interior looked frozen in another century. A table set with pewter plates, straw on the floor, and by the fireplace, a chair, rocking slowly, though no one sat in it. Daniel stepped closer, his throat dry. On the mantel above the fire, he saw a row of framed sketches, faces, all of them drawn in charcoal. He leaned in, and his blood ran cold. They were faces of people from different eras. Some wore old peasant clothes, others modern jackets, but all looked terrified. And at the very end of the row, one sketch was unfinished, just an outline. And in that outline was his own face. He stumbled backward, knocking the frame to the floor, when the rocking chair suddenly stopped. The air grew heavier, pressing down on him, and the whispering voices grew louder, chanting now, repeating the same words over and over. Stay with us. Daniel bolted out of the cottage, sprinting toward the village square. His breath tore from his lungs as he realized the cottages looked different now. Where once there had been cozy stone homes, there were now rotting husks, windows shattered, doors hanging open. It was as if the village had aged 100 years in the span of minutes. And then he saw them, figures moving between the houses, shadows tall and thin, drifting unnaturally, their faces pale and blurred, like unfinished paintings. Their heads turned toward him, though they had no eyes. They began to shuffle closer, surrounding him, whispering his name. Daniel's heart pounded. He tried to run, but every path twisted back into the square. No matter which direction he chose, he ended up in the same place, beside the well. The names carved into the wood seemed to writhe in the lantern's glow, letters twisting like snakes, and beneath his own name a fresh carving appeared before his eyes. Time to come home. He grabbed the edge of the well, gasping, his eyes drawn to the blackness below. Something stirred in that darkness, something vast, something alive. What do you think? Are these shadows the villagers themselves, cursed to remain forever? Or are they something far older, using the village as a trap for the living? Because in the next part, Daniel will face the horrifying truth, and the village will show him why no one ever leaves alive. Daniel clung to the edge of the well, his knuckles white as the ground beneath him trembled. From the blackness below came a low, guttural groan, like the earth itself was breathing. The air grew icy, his breath turning to mist, and the shadows circling him drew closer, their blurred faces twisting into grotesque shapes. Stay with us, they whispered, their voices layered, ancient and broken. Daniel's body screamed at him to run, but every path dissolved into darkness, forcing him back toward the well. He had no choice. He leaned over the edge, peering into the abyss. Something stared back. Two glowing eyes, yellow, inhuman, opened deep in the darkness. The groan became a growl, and then a voice slithered out, not from the well, but inside his own skull. You have always belonged here. Daniel staggered back, clutching his head, but the voice grew louder, rattling his bones. The shadows closed in, reaching for him with long, skeletal fingers. He bolted into one of the cottages, slamming the door shut behind him. His chest heaved as he looked around in the dim light. The cottage was no longer frozen in time. Now it was rotting, walls collapsing, furniture broken. On the floor lay bones, dozens of them, scattered like discarded dolls, human bones. And scratched into the walls, over and over, were desperate words. The village takes you back, always. Suddenly, a deafening knock shook the door. The shadows were outside, pounding, their whispers rising into screams. The wood splintered as Daniel backed away. His eyes landed on a staircase leading down to a cellar. Without thinking, he rushed down into the darkness. The cellar smelled of mold and decay. He flicked his lighter, the small flame flickering against stone walls smeared with black stains. And there, against the far wall, he saw them. Dozens of people, but they weren't alive. They weren't dead either. They were suspended in the walls themselves, as if the stone had swallowed them. Their mouths hung open in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, and they twitched faintly, as if caught between life and death. Daniel stumbled back, gagging, when he noticed one of the figures was fresher than the others. Its eyes darted toward him, pleading, its lips mouthing a single word, "Run." The lighter sputtered out. In the pitch black, Daniel felt something wet drip onto his shoulder. He froze. Slowly, he reached up to touch it. Blood. Warm blood. He tilted his head upward and saw a figure crawling along the ceiling, its limbs bending backward, its face stretched into a grin too wide for any human mouth. The creature dropped. Daniel screamed and bolted back up the stairs, bursting out of the cottage as the thing's claws scraped across the walls behind him. The shadows swarmed, their whispering now a deafening chorus. "Stay! Stay! Stay!" He ran toward the well in the center of the square, every instinct telling him it was the heart of this nightmare. The ground shook harder, the cottages collapsing into dust, the village itself unraveling as if time were collapsing. He grabbed the edge of the well, desperate for answers, desperate for escape, and then the voice returned. "If you wish to leave, you must take their place." Daniel's stomach turned cold. The shadows pressed closer. The creature from the cellar crawled into the square, its yellow eyes burning in the dark. He realized then the village wasn't abandoned, it wasn't forgotten, it was alive, and it needed to feed. What would you do if you stood at that well, faced with the choice to sacrifice yourself or someone else to survive? Because in the final part, Daniel will make his decision, and the Vanishing Village will reveal its last, horrifying secret. Daniel gripped the edge of the well until his nails split. The voice inside his skull pulsed like thunder, filling every thought with the same demand: take their place or stay forever. The shadows swarmed tighter, whispering his name now, their eyeless faces inches from his own. The creature from the cellar skittered across the square, bones cracking with each unnatural step, its grin stretching impossibly wide. Daniel's mind raced. If he jumped into the well, would it take him? Or was the voice demanding something darker, someone else to feed the village in his stead? But there was no one else, only him. His eyes fell on the names carved into the wood, twisting and glowing faintly in the moonlight. Every one of them had been trapped here before, just as he was now. Perhaps they had made the same choice. Perhaps they had failed. And yet his name, the one freshly carved, seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The ground split beneath his feet, the cottages collapsing into ash, the trees folding inward like skeletal arms. Time itself was unraveling. The shadows screamed, the well groaned, and the voice roared again. "Choose!" Daniel staggered back, his mind shattering under the weight of it. In a moment of defiance or desperation, he screamed, "Take me then!" and threw himself into the blackness of the well. Silence. The shadows stopped moving. The creature froze, its grin fading. The village grew still. For a moment, Daniel felt weightless, suspended in endless dark. Then he opened his eyes. He was standing back at his car. The forest road stretched out behind him, whole again, as if it had never vanished. The sun was rising. Birds chirped in the distance. For a breathless moment, he thought he had escaped. But when he looked closer, dread coiled in his stomach. His car was different, older, rusted, its paint faded. His reflection in the window was gaunt, hollow-eyed, as if decades had passed in a single night. And when he glanced down at the side of the car, fresh scratches gleamed in the metal. Not welcome back this time, but 3 new words. Now it's yours. Daniel looked up in horror. The village was gone, swallowed by trees. But he understood. He hadn't escaped. He had taken its place. From that day forward, travelers on that forgotten road sometimes see a figure standing by a rusted car, waving them down, asking for help. Those who stop never make it home. The Vanishing Village always needs more names. So, I'll ask you this. If you were driving down a lonely road and a desperate stranger waved you down, would you you stop, or would you keep driving, even if it meant leaving someone behind? Because remember, some places should not exist, and once they notice you, they never let you go. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Shadow Tales, where nightmares are waiting for you every night.